Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Inga Cotton. I'm the founder and executive director of San Antonio Charter Moms, and these are Charter Moms Chats. And we've been going live to explain to families the stuff they need to know to help their kids get a great education and to keep advocating for the quality of education here in San Antonio. And today our guest is Tom Torkelson. He is the CEO of Choose to Succeed, and they are a great organization that has been bringing high-performing charter schools to San Antonio since, shortly after 2010. And so Tom has experience as a teacher and as a charter school co-founder, and very effective at growth and creating high-quality schools. And he's bringing that knowledge to San Antonio to help continue to grow the community of charter schools. So Tom wrote a guest post. It's on the blog today, and I encourage you to click on the link in the description of the video to be able to read that post and see the awesome graphs that Nicole put together. But Tom, I'm really grateful that you can join us on Charter Moms Chat so we can have a conversation about what's happening in the charter school sector in San Antonio.
Well, Inga, thank you so much for having me. It's always a pleasure, and good to see you again.
Yeah, good to see you. Yeah, I checked the last time that you were a guest on Charter Moms Chats was last October, and a lot has happened since then. So how are you doing? How's your family?
Well, everybody's great. Thank you for asking. All of our children are in some form of summer camp right now. We've got one in Hunt, Texas, one at a military academy in the Rio Grande Valley, and one who we just picked up actually from Michigan and flew back yesterday. So, it's been a little bit of a pre-empty nester window into what our life might be. But, a lot has changed since we met in October. I think one of the biggest things that has come to light, when we met last October, we were discussing and we were speculating about what the pandemic would mean for students, student development, the emotional and psychological health of children. And also, if you're a school, one of the best ways to quantify both of those things is to look at whether or not students are thriving. And when they are thriving, one of the ways that shows up is that, test scores are going well. Well, since October, we have had the statewide results that have come back, and they have been pretty bad, pretty devastating. And I think that over the next couple of months, we're going to be able to begin to quantify just how much students have lost academically. And again, that's not the only measure that matters, but if you are an empiricist, if you look at data, one of the things that you want to do is look at data over time, year after year after year after year. And, we can't always easily quantify emotional health of students, but we have this very rich treasure trove of test data. And if the test data is showing that kids are falling behind academically, I don't think it's too much of a jump to imagine that there are other ways that their development is being stunted. So we really have our work cut out for us as educators.
Yeah. Well, Tom, that's a really good insight about what's happening now and where we're at now. And the standardized test data, that's been on for our team, that's been on our mind as well. And like in late June, that's when the STAR report cards for families showed up in our inboxes. And I know some of us just kind of scroll past it, but I tried to really dig in and see what I can learn from it. And I'm planning to take that to my kids' teachers next year and kind of ask hey, it looks like there's a gap here. My kids did distance learning for most of the year. My son was distance learning all year last year, and there are some gaps, and there's some work to do.
Well, you mentioned distance learning, and I think that that is probably the macro, the big trend that we saw. Students who are in-person learning and districts who are primarily in-person, those students either made very, very, very modest gains, they stayed the same, or they just had very small kind of setbacks. Students who were stuck in distance learning lost the most, and districts that were primarily doing distance learning as a whole, those systems really failed to thrive. So, that's what we're seeing from a policy perspective, we have 3 children. At the beginning of the year, 2 of them were in a charter school, schools that I founded. 1 of them remained. The other we switched to a very small private in-person only school because the online wasn't working for him. And so I saw in my own household what we saw in the data was perfectly reflected with what we saw anecdotally in our children. So, and I will tell you who are the districts who were primarily in person. They were overwhelmingly middle and upper income. They were overwhelmingly white Anglo. They were overwhelmingly suburban. So those kids and those parents already had an advantage, and they built upon that advantage. Good for them, but I wish that we would have had more schools, do something similar, because this could have been an opportunity for children, primarily children from lower income backgrounds, to have made up ground. But instead, once again, our public schools are not a ladder out of poverty. They're not a ladder to cure inequity. They are becoming just another institution that that takes these inequities and just sets them in stone. And we've got to do better. And I think there's an opportunity for charter schools.
Yeah. Well, I know that's been a driving force in your work, right? I mean, it's why you joined Teach for America. It's why you took a job in the Rio Grande Valley, is to close those gaps and, to make sure that no matter what background children are coming from, that they can get an education that will create opportunities for them. And I know that's driving what you're doing at Choose to Succeed. So I think that's my opportunity to segue to ask you about I've been watching Choose to Succeed's work, since 2012, like when the SA Charter Moms blog started, and there's just been tremendous growth in the charter school sector in San Antonio. So I was wondering if you could comment more. And there's data in the blog post. I encourage everyone to click on that and look at the graphs. But so from your perspective, what have you seen as far as growth in the charter school sector in San Antonio since Choose to Succeed was created?
Well, Choose to Succeed, the work of Choose to Succeed began roughly in 2010. That's before CTS was founded, but Victoria Rico, the visionary chairwoman of the Brackenridge Foundation, she made it her mission to expand the number of high-performing charter school seats that were available, all different kinds of schools, hybrid learning schools, classical education, really intense college prep schools, Montessori schools, all different types of schools. She wanted there to be an all of the above strategy for the city of San Antonio. When she began that work, there were about 1,000. There were 1,200 students in high-performing charter seats. Almost all of them were in San Antonio. And since 2010, this fall, we are projecting we'll have 40,000 students, 40,000. I think I'm doing my math right. I think that's a 4,000% increase. Look, that's not Choose to Succeed that has caused that. We've both kind of hitched our lasso onto that rocket that was already going up, and we've also poured a little bit more fuel to the fire as well. So, we've caused some of it, but mostly we were just encouraging and supporting the growth that was already going to happen. And I think that's positive. I defy anybody to show why it's a bad thing that children across San Antonio now have many, many more dozens of free, high-quality options for school.
Yeah, the landscape has changed tremendously. Yeah, back in 2012, my son was in preschool, and there weren't, we looked around and we didn't see any charter schools that were really the right fit for him. And so there was a point, like when he was in first grade, when I homeschooled him because I just didn't think there was an actual school that was going to serve him. And then when Great Hearts opened, that worked great for him for elementary school and middle school. And then he's actually transitioning to a different charter school for high school. So the adventure continues. But I really appreciate that there's so much breadth now, and that like in a qualitative sense, like that, that diversity of school models is out there. But one of the things you talk about in the post that I think is really important for people to think about the charter school sector is that it's not always a straight line, and not every new school succeeds. But it's like entrepreneurship. There's a process of creative destruction, right? That the good schools get more fuel and grow faster, and the schools that aren't working, they go away.
We're actually seeing in San Antonio the most healthy education, like I would say the most healthy example of what capitalism could be. Across the US, unfortunately, we're seeing consolidation. We're seeing small mom and pop independent retailers and grocery stores and restaurants kind of, forced out of business. We're seeing these macro platform businesses, an Amazon platform, for example. I mean, you guys know them. It's radically changed the economy in a way that I don't think a lot of people think is, very good. We have more wealth and more power in just a fewer number of companies. We're seeing the opposite in San Antonio. We are seeing many more small schools that are popping up. We used to have 10, 15 school districts that are serving San Antonio. If you count charters, now that number is approaching 30. So there's more variety. There's more options. There's less centralization. There's less monopoly. I mean, these neighborhood schools that are popping up that are all vastly different from each other, and they're very independent. I mean, this is exactly, if this were an economy, this is what a healthy economy looks like. It's not really economy, it's education. They're all nonprofits, but this is what a healthy sector should look like. So I think that's been fantastic. And, you mentioned creative destruction. There was in the early days, 2012, 2013, right around there, this organization called Carpe Diem was launched. And, there were some wealthy individuals and foundations that kicked in a couple $1 million to make this school work. Great idea, great concept. It was working beautifully, I believe, in Arizona. And when it came to San Antonio, for a variety of reasons, it just didn't work. It didn't translate well. There were problems replicating what made that school in one community magical in our community. It just didn't work. But it instead of going for years and years of reform and renaming the school, and I mean, it was shut down. Yeah, some private foundations and some wealthy individuals lost some money, but that is the appropriate place for philanthropy. You make bets, sometimes small bets, sometimes big bets. Some of them will take off, like Basis and Great Hearts and Idea. I mean, now I want to start naming all of the schools because I don't want to leave anybody out. And some won't. And failure is not a hallmark of a failed system. In this case, failure is the hallmark of a very healthy ecosystem that is, replicating more of the good stuff and allowing the bad stuff to kind of go away.
Yeah, the important thing is, are the schools all serving their students well? And those are the schools that should exist. And any school that is not serving students well should no longer exist. Right. And that's, that's the ethical way for a sector to operate. Yeah. One of the things that I know that you can't tell me everything that's on the that's cooking, but I know that there's some growth that's in the pipeline that you can talk about. And so, right, there was a Essence Prep, right? Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, well, no, I mean, I'm so excited about it, Inga. I just can't wait to talk about it. We have some great schools that are opening up in a couple of weeks. Royal Public Schools. I was just touring that campus a couple of hours ago. The building is celebrating its 100th anniversary. It was built in 1921. They have done a beautiful renovation. I mean, brand new marble floors in the hallways, brand new, just beautiful glass and glazing, and just a great job updating and upgrading the building. And buildings don't teach kids, teachers teach kids, but a great building sends a message to kids: hey, you matter, we care about you, you're important. Schools are the first way that most Americans as children get to interact with civic life, and it's important that they know that the civic institutions that are built for them are done with a lot of care, and that will be a primarily Latino population of students, mostly students from working class families, a lot of families who are struggling financially, and this school is a lifeline for them. Lauren Lewis is also opening up Prelude just a couple of miles away from Royal, and they are successfully winning the race to get that school open by the first day of school, and that's going really well. So those are just two brand new schools that are opening this fall. And we had two new great educators get their schools approved. Akiem, has Akiem been on one of your blog? Well, I know he's blogged for you. Has he been on one of your charter talks before?
Yes. Although I admit I dialed in from my son's party we were at the pool, but we we still had a good signal. And yes, that's summer life. But yes, Akiem, and then his board member Brian Dillard also joined that chat. So yeah, that was a really good one.
Well, Akiem was approved, and of course we were just thrilled for him. And I thought that his application was fantastic. Just he did a really, really exceptional job on it. So there's a lot of good stuff that's happening, and his school will open up a year from now. So we're very enthusiastic about that as well.
Yeah. Well, and then Nicole said there were some graphs she couldn't send me yet because but I know that there's plans for the growth to accelerate, and that's really exciting because.
Well, I forget the numbers. Yeah. I think that I think that when Akiem's charter application was approved, that he had listed in his application that there were going to be 3 or 4 schools around San Antonio that he would launch over time. And he's got a wonderful vision for that school. He's begun to hire some very talented individuals who are going to help him bring his vision to life. And this is another example of how children and families win when there are more high quality options.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I know Royal Public Schools, they're opening one campus this fall, but they have plans to have a cluster, like a feeder pattern for their middle school, high school.
That's right.
And Basis announced additional campuses, right, like on the far west side, and so Basis keeps growing. So
I will tell you, I mean, the competition is fierce. It is harder now to open up a school and have it fully enrolled than it was 5 years ago, than it was 10 years ago. You used to just kind of put your sign outside the building and wait for parents to show up. Well, parents and students, they're expecting more. They're expecting a knock on the door. They're expecting to be able to personally hear from people leading the school of what the mission and what the vision of the school is. Your site has really educated parents. And parents have just become much savvier consumers of education. And I think it's a good thing. And hey, we can't be the people who are all for choice, and then when all of a sudden people aren't always just choosing to automatically come to our new schools, we whine about it. No, we gotta embrace it, and we gotta work hard to get the message out and explain to parents, why we exist and what we're about.
Yeah. And it becomes part of a dialogue of, like listening to parents about what locations they need, and what extracurriculars or what school models what type of curriculum they're looking for. And it makes everything better. It's exciting for me to be, part of that conduit, getting the information out, and, and for like awakening parents to the idea that they're the ones with the power to make that choice.
Yeah. I'll give you another example. School of Excellence in Education had just struggled for years. Their enrollment had declined. I mean, at one point they had 1,000, maybe thousands of students that had trickled down to just a couple of hundred. The focus on excellence wasn't there. I mean, ironically, they're called the School of Excellence, but they didn't have a track record of excellence. Parents sensed that, they understood it. Oftentimes they chose different charter schools. Well, there's a very high performing group from Arizona that was able to take over management of that school. And they've injected millions of dollars of resources. They're renovating the buildings. They've given a complete overhaul to the curriculum, to the teaching staff, to the leadership. Maisha, this wonderful woman, is in charge of that school and doing a great job running it. And again, this is just another example of innovative things that charter schools have chosen to do when they see that they're not getting the job done. And this school, I mean, mark my words, several years from now, people are going to be talking about that as being one of the top performing schools in Bexar County, but also in the state of Texas.
Yeah, I drove by the campus on Bassey the other day, and they had their banners out and their feather flags, and I was so excited to see like the rebranding and kind of the awakening and relaunch of this school. Because it's like you said, it's it's an entrepreneurial process. It's about the health of the sector, and it's about serving students as best as possible.
And like the United States is pretty much the only modern, serious country that has one way of delivering public school, which is through school districts. In Canada and Great Britain, very similar to us demographically, Catholic schools and religious schools are funded by the state. They also have district schools. They also have schools run by nonprofits that are charter schools. They're all nonprofit, but there's a variety of different ways that education is delivered. I mean, it is too much of a burden for one district to have to meet the needs of every single parent and student. We don't expect that in every other sector, in any other sector rather, but for some reason we expect that in education in the United States. So really, we're just sort of joining the League of Modern Nations by having a lot more different ways to ensure that public education that's high quality is reaching all of our citizens.
Yeah. Well, and that there's a point you made in the post I thought was really helpful, is that just to understand that there are challenges and there are obstacles for the growth of charter schools, and I think you described it as that it's people and it's also politics, right? And that when there's a system that sees itself as a monopoly and having an entitlement, to own all the students, that's not a good process. It's not that doesn't lead to taking the best care of those students.
Yeah, I mean, so the challenges are people. That's on the side. This is an internal challenge that we are facing as in the charter sector, but really all of education. I was listening to the former president of Harvard University give a talk one time, and she was saying, her first name is Drew, her last name escapes me. She was saying that when they were polling the incoming freshmen at Harvard, something like 2/3 of them wanted to be educators. None of them wanted to be investment bankers. None of them wanted to be consultants. They had no idea what those fields were. Fast forward 4 years, none of them are going into education. I mean, practically none of them. And they were all going into consulting and investment banking. And so what happened in that 4 years? Well, you had corporate recruiters who were aggressively going for top talent. But the other thing that happened is, educators have been fighting and bickering. And if you have a profession that doesn't pay particularly well, that ought to be more respected in the public in terms of resources, but isn't. And then on top of that, you got unions yelling at charters. You got charters saying, "Hey, you're lying about us." Like, colleges like, "Boy, I don't want to be part of this." And then the backlash against testing and all of the vitriol going with that. We have talked down the profession and the sector of education, and as a result, we are failing to win the best and the brightest to our sector. And we need to. In most other countries, the best and the brightest are choosing education at the same rates as they're choosing medicine, at the same rates that they're choosing accounting. And in those nations, you also have a much smaller gap between what physicians make and doctors make, or accountants make, and what teachers make. So, there's a number of challenges we have to fix. I think innovative charter schools are doing a very good job of fixing that. And then the other challenge really is just political. Charter schools used to have bipartisan support. Bill Clinton was in favor of charter schools. George W. Bush was in favor of charter schools. Barack Obama's education secretary was, and he and Arne Duncan were maybe the most pro a charter school of any duo in history. President Trump and Betsy DeVos were very, pro-charter. But during that time, the unions have become ascendant, and the unions have said, we can organize districts because they're large, but we can't organize little individual charters. And if we can't organize them, they can't be union paying due members. Therefore, we're going to lose our power. So the unions have made it their mission to attack Teach for America and to attack charter schools. Teach for America has shrunk. It is a shadow of itself in terms of the number of incoming, core members they have. And if we're not careful, they're going to have the same effect on charter schools.
Yeah, that's really chilling. The idea, there's so much misinformation, and that's a big part of what SA Charter Moms is trying to do, right? Like we're trying, like nuts and bolts, to help families problem solve, right, and get their kids into a school that's a good fit. But we also want to awaken parents to this idea that, it's not just enough to take care of this for our own kids. Like we have a responsibility that all kids, right, including, the families who have fewer advantages, who have maybe less time, or maybe have a language barrier, or that we need to advocate for a great education for every kid in San Antonio, regardless of what zip code they're in. And we can't let the politics get in the way. But yeah, there's so much, hot button issues and just controversy and distraction. And I think you made a really good point. Like at the beginning of our talk, talking about we need to look at the standardized testing data, right? We need to use it as a tool to help students, not get in, arguments about. I don't even like to think about it. I just feel like there's so much stuff that just wastes our time. Like I don't really want the state, telling teachers what they can and can't say about, the history of racism in the United States. Like I feel like that's a way to score political points, but it's not actually helping, kids to get the skills that they need so they can be independent and have great jobs and go to college and join the military and do great stuff with their lives.
That's right. Yeah, the politicization of what is taught and curriculum. I mean, that's not good. That is what totalitarian regimes do, and we shouldn't see it. We shouldn't see it on the left. We shouldn't see it on the right. And the best way, again, to ensure that doesn't happen is for credible arguments on both sides to be robustly debated, to be robustly argued, and to trust that if we educate our students well and people have facts and they understand the difference between facts and propaganda, that they're going to be able to make up their own mind and they can think for themselves. And that is the. I mean, so we've got to get past that nonsense. There's the 1776 Project, which talks about the true founding of America being in the Revolution. That's seen as very conservative. There's the 1619 Project, which is seen as being very progressive, talking about slavery. And the reality is we need a robust examination of both sides, of all the topics, of all the facts, and we need to talk about what are facts and what is opinion and what is conjecture, and the very gray line that often exists between the two. And the fact that we don't have those debates, this is why a part of why people are so susceptible to misinformation or fake news or things that pop up on the internet and Facebook feeds that are not grounded in reality. So the only way that we can continue to have a strong democracy is if we have an informed and critically aware citizenry.
Yeah.
So, we're arguing about schools, but we're really arguing about the future of democracy. And look, I think the United States has been an enormous force of good on this planet, warts and all. And the idea that as the leading democracy that we might be fading a little bit is quite frightening. Because there's nobody else waiting in the wings who's going to talk about the values of freedom and equality and human rights. So it's just teachers, principals, keep doing what you're doing, because this is the most important work that is happening right now. It's in our classrooms.
Yeah, well, this is what this goes back to a point you made a moment ago about why we need great talent in the classroom and as school leaders, is that it is such a challenging job to, make the students be well informed about our history and to be critical thinkers and, be media savvy about what they take in. And that's why we need the best and brightest in education.
Well, and again, I mean, what you are doing with Charter Moms and what you're doing in talks like these, I mean, it's a positive, constructive way. Let's lower the volume, lower the temperature, and just have a dialogue, which I think we need to see a lot more of. So I thank you for what you're doing, and just continue to have different guests on and shine a spotlight on some of the different aspects of public education in San Antonio that need more highlighting.
Yeah, but I want to. We got a comment. My friend Brady, she mentioned, this is at the beginning of our chat. She, I think the last time you and I talked, it was we were anticipating like what was going to happen at the legislature. Now the legislative session, well, that session ended. Right now we're in a special session, and it's just, yeah, it's always a cycle, right? There's always new problems to solve, new challenges to overcome.
Yeah, I mean, I think education did very well in the last session. There were no dramatic cuts to public education. There were no dramatic limitations on charter schools or increased regulation. So this was very much a status quo session for education. The big thing that's happened that's been different is about $118 million has been pumped into the public education system across the United States. A decade ago, there was this thing called Race to the Top. It was the Obama administration's attempt to reinvigorate public education. That was $2 billion spread across 50 states. I mean, this is 60 times that size. So this has been a massive injection of public money. And, the better charter schools and the better school systems are using that money in a thoughtful, strategic way to push learning forward. And I hope that happens, because if we spend a couple $100 billion and we see that test scores haven't moved, it's going to really erase a lot of future public support to invest in education, and we just can't afford that.
Yeah. No, it's a huge opportunity, but the money needs to be spent well. It needs to get results, right? We need to look at the data and help kids, close the gaps as best we can. And
locally, over 150 million is going to IDEA public schools across Texas. I think a little bit north of $100 million is going to San Antonio ISD. KIPP, Texas, is getting over $100 million of that federal money. So, school districts obviously are getting the lion's share of it, as one would expect, because they have the majority of market share. But this is a really important investment in young people, and I think I think we can do some really great things over the next couple of years with that.
Yeah. Oh, Brady has some additional comments. Oh, she was talking about the fact that virtual education is not an option. Let's see. Oh, city non-discrimination bill. Yeah. So I think that there was a bill that.
I'm so glad that Brady discussed this. That virtual education bill needs to be taken up and it needs to be passed. There was very little opposition to it. It just didn't get in time. Now, look, some of your viewers are going to realize this, but cities are able to discriminate against your children. They're able to discriminate against children in charter schools. They are able to treat charter schools to a set of tougher, more onerous, more challenging set of regulations than district schools. They're able to charge charter schools more money for city utilities than they charge public school districts. We had a bill, and Brady had the number up there, if you can throw it back up there, that just said, look, we don't want special treatment. We just want fair treatment. If my child transfers from San Antonio ISD to Promesa, why should they all of a sudden now be in an environment where it is harder for those educators to run their business? It is unconscionable. We faced this at IDEA from the San Antonio City Council. Now the San Antonio City Council voted against it. They wanted to strip us of our tax exemption for the purpose of issuing bonds, which would have meant that when we built our buildings, and these were not bonds funded by the city of San Antonio. All the city of San Antonio had to do was verify that we were indeed a nonprofit, and then we got the best rates possible. The unions testified and said, you need to oppose this. And if it would have been successful, we would have had millions of dollars a year that were going to Wall Street in the form of higher interest rates. Thankfully we fought it, but we shouldn't even have to expend time and energy and resources just convincing people that we have a right to be treated fairly. And that should have been passed. It needed to have been passed, and we have to keep the same pressure on. So, thank you, Bridie, for bringing that up.
Yeah. So the Texas Public Charter Schools Association, that's on my to-do list, is to check in with them, because they did get a number of wins in the past legislative session, and we're going to cover more about that and celebrate the progress that they did make. But they were kind of housekeeping things. But yeah, Bridie's correct that city non-discrimination bill, the fact that cities can treat charter schools as lesser than other schools, that makes no sense. And it's talking about these issues. I hope that by the time the next legislative session comes around, more and more families in the SA Charter Moms community are aware of these issues, and we'll speak up about it when it's time to nudge, tell our state reps and our state senators how we feel about these things. Brady's got another comment. Let's see. Yes. So this has to do with again, with the virtual education bill. There's a family affected by that. They really want to use Great Hearts Online. They can't because, it's not, virtual education is not funded. And that family wrote an op-ed in the Express News, and we shared a longer version of their op-ed on our site.
Well, again, hopefully we can remedy this. I know that Texas had encouraged people like Great Hearts to launch these virtual schools. There was emergency funding that was provided. I think there was a strong indication that would be made permanent, and people were very surprised that it wasn't. So we've got to get that fixed. Yeah.
It's tough, but I think back to, there have been times when I was really worried about finding the right situation for my kids, and so even though now my kids are better situated, they're more mature, and there's a wider range of options in San Antonio, I can really identify with the families who feel like they have found their thing, right? They found the perfect online school, or the perfect mom and pop charter school, and then it gets yanked out from under them, and those situations are really heartbreaking. That's why we need to keep working, right? Keep spreading the word about why this movement is so important.
Yeah. Well, and Inga, I've said this before, but this is an issue of equity. If you have a lot of money and the rug gets pulled off from underneath you, then you find the new private school, you move to a different city, you move to a different part of town, you find a boarding school, you keep looking and looking and looking, you have so many options, but you only have those options if you have money. And unfortunately, right now, money equals high quality education, and that is a recipe, again, for inequity in the United States. So, this is something very practical and very tangible that everybody can do to make sure that there is a ladder out of poverty, and that children from all different backgrounds, all different ethnicities, all different races, all different income brackets, that they really can access the American dream. We can do it. There's a lot of evidence, overwhelming evidence, that great schooling can reverse the effects of racism and poverty. But unfortunately, because of racism and because of poverty, it is very difficult to get all kids into great public schools. But we're doing it in San Antonio, and we just have to double and triple down on it. What we need are great schools and way more of them.
Yeah. Well, that, I can't top that. That's I think we should end on that note. But I'm putting the link on the screen, choose2succeed.org. So that's how folks can learn about what happens at Choose to Succeed. They can find all the schools in the portfolio, but it's exactly like Tom said. This is the best way to fight racism and inequity, and to give all kids an opportunity to succeed. And so why should education should not be a tool for perpetuating gaps and inequity. It should be a tool for lifting up people and giving every kid a chance, giving the next generation a chance to live their best lives.
Right. Well, Inga, thank you again for having me on.
Thanks, Tom. See you soon.
All right. Bye-bye.